Hi guys. So let's continue the discussion from where we left yesterday. So yesterday we have seen about what is RS physiology, how we have to approach it, then what are the different graphical representation. We discussed about the surfactant, we discussed about the compliance, then we have discussed about this very particular graph, okay, lung compliance graph or hysteresis. We discussed what is hysteresis. Then we have also discussed this very important thing, that is going to be your tidal volume. You have different volumes and spaces inside your lungs. We have discussed about all those things. And today we are going to start with this wonderful topic that is going to be your gas transport. Okay, that is going to be your gas transport. Very, very important. So once we complete this, I'll make this a very short video so that this is going to be a recorded, so you can just view it anytime when you're going to be free. Once you complete this video, you will be very thorough in your RS. And then probably by Monday or Tuesday, I will continue with other topics of your physiology and also your biochemistry. Okay, so to start with, let's start with the discussion. So what happens basically is you are going to have a oxygen, carbon dioxide, two important gaseous components that are going to be playing a role in the gas transport inside our lungs. Okay, so let's discuss about this first one, that is going to be your carbon dioxide transport. Carbon dioxide transport. See what happens, carbon dioxide is going to get transported in two different varieties. Number one, it is going to be transported as bicarbonates. Okay, it can be transported as bicarbonates. 70% is going to be transported as a bicarbonate, 70% it is going to be transported as bicarbonate, and remaining 20% it is going to be transported as a carbemoglobin. Okay, carbemoglobin. Okay, so that is going to be around 20%. Carbaminoglobin are 20%. Bicarbonate 70%. It is going to be transported, and remaining 1%, almost somewhat 1% will be in the dissolved form. It is going to be in the dissolved form. Okay, so you have something called as Hamburger phenomena. That will be asked as a short note question for you all. Hamburger phenomenon, which will be actually asked as a short note question. Okay, Hamburger phenomena, which can be asked as a short note question for you all. What is this Hamburger phenomena? If you understand this Hamburger phenomena, you don't need to mug up anything. Okay, so Hamburger phenomena is otherwise called as chloride shift. Okay, it's otherwise called as chloride shift. What basically occurs in the Hamburger phenomena? Just see this one picture. It is going to be helping you. Okay, what happens is you have a carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide is going to be the waste product or metabolic product of your tissues after it receives oxygen. This carbon dioxide has to be transported from your tissues and it should be transported back to your lungs for reoxygenation. Upon the carbon dioxide, your red blood cells are going to go there. Your red blood cell, what it does is it is going to get absorb your carbon dioxide from your tissue. This carbon dioxide is going to get added with the water. Okay, it is going to get added with the water. Okay, it is going to form HCO3 minus. It is going to form HCO3 minus. Okay, it's going to form HCO3 minus. Okay, wow. So you have two type of phenomena which occurs. Okay, you have two type of phenomena which can occur here. So your carbon dioxide, it can get combined with the hemoglobinized oxygen, HbO2. Okay, so HbO2, and what it does is it is going to give you HbCO2. Hemoglobin binds with your carbon dioxide and oxygen is released, and this oxygen can go into the plasma. This is one thing. Otherwise, what happens? The carbon dioxide adds with your water in the presence of carbonic anhydrase. It is going to form HCO3 minus. HCO3 minus plus H plus. In the H plus enna pannuna, it binds with the hemoglobin. Again, in the hemoglobin oda bind aguma, now oxygen dissociate agum. So இது எல்லாமே basically எதுக்குன்னா oxygen dissociation காக. So what happens is you wanted to your oxygen is going to be binded with hemoglobin, but your carbon dioxide has more affinity towards your hemoglobin. So what happens? Your carbon dioxide is going to come and release your oxygen by two ways. Either carbon dioxide directly binds with your hemoglobin and releases oxygen, or else it is going to form HCO3 minus and release hydrogen ion. This hydrogen ion is going to combine with the hemoglobin and releases your oxygen. But unfortunately, you have one more problem. What is that problem? If you're going to see, the problem here is going to be you have more amount of HCO3 minus in your RBC. This HCO3 minus has to be removed. If you want to remove the HCO3, what happens is you wanted to exchange with some other ion. What ion is going to be exchanged in replacing your HCO3 minus? That is going to be a chloride. So there is going to be a chloride shift from your plasma into your RBC. From your plasma into your RBC, there is going to be a chloride shift, and that is called as your Amberger phenomena or chloride shift. That is called as your Amberger's phenomena, otherwise called as your chloride shift. This is what is your carbon dioxide transport. Remember guys, your hematocrit of the blood, hematocrit of venous blood. Okay, you have two type of blood, right? In your venous blood, hematocrit is going to be more than your oxygen arterial blood. Okay, hematocrit of your venous blood is more than your arterial blood. This is a one liner which I want you all to remember. And second thing is going to be pH of your venous blood. pH of your venous blood is going to be more acidic. It's going to be more acidic. Okay, it's going to be more acidic. More acidic than your arterial blood, Can you tell me what is the reason for it, guys? So what would be the reason why there is going to be a pH rise in the venous blood? See, venous blood na carbon dioxide collect ஆயிருக்குல்ல, அதுதான் venous blood நம்ம சொல்றோம். So இப்போ என்ன பண்ணுது, ஆக்சிஜன் எல்லாம் dissociate ஆகுது, carbon dioxide collect பண்ணிட்டு வருது. அப்ப carbon dioxide collect பண்ணிட்டு வரும்போது what happens here is you will be having more H plus ion, HCO3 minus and H plus ion inside your blood. So H plus ion is going to cause acidity. It's going to cause acidic nature. So this is going to cause acidic nature. Now can you understand why there is acidic nature? So it is going to cause acidic nature. Okay, H plus ion is going to cause acidic nature. Therefore, the pH of the venous blood is going to be more acidic than your arterial blood. Okay, it's going to be more acidic than your arterial blood. Now, after completing the carbon dioxide transport, now let's see about the oxygen transport mechanism. More I think over 4 pages. Okay, more 4 or 5 pages, that is alone left. So what is oxygen transport? See here, you need to understand certain terminologies. You need to write down those terminologies. Okay, I want you all to write down those terminologies. Remember, 97%, first thing, 97% of oxyhemoglobin is okay. Oxygen is going to be present as 97% is going to present as combined form with hemoglobin. Only 3% is going to be present as dissolved. Okay, in the blood, only 3% is going to be as a dissolved oxygen. See here, you're going to have a hemoglobin like this. This is how your hemoglobin structure will be. Okay, this is how your hemoglobin structure will be like this one. Okay, you're going to have 2, 3, and then you're going to have 4. This is how your hemoglobin structure will be, no more closer than what I have drawn. So what happens is you're going to have a Fe, okay, you're going to have Fe2 plus ion inside, okay, Fe2 plus, Fe2 plus, you're going to have Fe2 plus. So what happens, this is going to be your alpha chain and this is going to be your beta chain. Remember guys, your alpha chain and beta chain ரெண்டு இருக்கு. இதுல இந்த ஃபெரஸோட இருக்கக்கூடிய அந்த குளோபின்ஸ் வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா they have more affinity, oxygen affinity இருக்கும். Okay, it's going to have more oxygen affinity. ஓகேவா? So in the beta chain, so beta chainல oxygen affinity will be more when compared to that of your alpha chain. Alpha chainல இருக்கக்கூடிய குளோபுலின்ஸ்க்கு carbon dioxide oxygen affinity will be lesser. So oxygen affinity will be more in the beta chain when compared to that of the alpha chain. So what you have to remember is, just remember, sorry, just 1 minute. Okay, see here, what you're going to remember is 97% of oxygen is going to be as a hemoglobinized form. Okay, hemoglobinized form. Only 3% of oxygen is going to be as a dissolved form. It is going to be as a dissolved form. Okay, only 3% is going to be as a dissolved form. Okay, so first point what you're going to write is 97% is going to be as a hemoglobinized form, and 3% is going to be as a dissolved form. This is the first point you're going to remember. And remember, the globulin chain is going to combine with one molecule of, so one globulin chain is going to combine with one molecule of oxygen, So oxygenated hemoglobin is going to have a higher affinity for oxygen than your deoxyhemoglobin. So oxygenated hemoglobin will be having more affinity for oxygen than your deoxygenated hemoglobin. And 1 gram of hemoglobin, remember 1 gram of hemoglobin is going to be consisting of 1.34 ml of oxygen. This is a very important MCQ question that can be asked. Okay, 1.34 ml of oxygen. And remember, the fourth and very important point is oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Dissociation curve is going to be in the sigmoid shape. It's going to be a sigmoid shape. It's going to be in the sigmoid shape. Because why it is in the sigmoid shape? Because of positive cooperative. Okay, it is positively cooperative. What is this positively cooperative? உங்க book கொடுத்திருப்போம். Positively cooperating அப்படினா என்னன்னா, it has a good okay, it is going to have a very good oxygen affinity. So it's going to be having a high oxygen affinity. Okay, high oxygen affinity. Adha வந்து we are just representing as positive cooperativity. So that is going to be having a good affinity. Okay, now you have a very important question. What are the places where there is going to be a positive shift? What are the places you are going to have a negative shift? In the question கண்டிப்பா உங்களுக்கு எக்ஸாம்ல வரும். ஓகேவா? ஸோ வந்து எக்ஸாம்ல வந்தா you have to just remember. See here. So இதான் உங்க sigmoid curve. So can you see here? This is going to be your sigmoid curve, guys. This is going to be your sigmoid curve. So இங்க நீங்க என்ன தெரியணும்னா, whenever there is going to be increased affinity, what happens? There is going to be a oxygen saturation pressure in the oxygen. So இந்த சைடுல pressure in the oxygen, அந்த சைடுல வந்து ஆக்சிஜன் சேச்சுரேஷன், ரெண்டு தான் நம்ம ஹீமோகுளோபின் சேச்சுரேஷன் தான் மீன் பண்றோம். So whenever the blood is going to be returning from the tissues, okay, whenever there is going to be a blood returning from the tissue, what happens? Carbon dioxide is going to come inside. So when the carbon dioxide is going to come inside, what happens? Okay, so when the carbon dioxide is going to come inside, what happens? There is going to be more carbon dioxide present. So more carbon dioxide or more hydrogen ion இருக்கிறப்ப oxygen என்ன ஆகும்? Dissociate ஆயிடும். So remember, very easy. Whenever there is going to be more hydrogen ion, whenever there is going to be more carbon dioxide, what happens? Whenever there is a more carbon dioxide, whenever there is more hydrogen ion, whenever there is low pH, whenever there is going to be increased acidity, what happens? Oxygen gets dissociated. அப்ப oxygen dissociate ஆச்சுன்னா carboxyhemoglobin level கம்மியாகும். Whenever carboxyhemoglobin level reduces, it shifts towards right side. Okay, it shifts towards right side. That means whenever there is a right shift, என்ன அர்த்தம்? There is going to be decreased affinity. There is going to be decreased affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. There is a decreased affinity for hemoglobin for oxygen. What are the places where you will have a decreased affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen? That is going to be increase in the PCO2 level. Increase in the PCO2 level. This is called as your Aldane's effect. This is called as your Aldane's effect. This is going to be number 1. Number 2, when there is going to be rise in the temperature as given in the picture. Number 3, when there is a anemia on the oxygen saturation level கம்மியாகும். Number 4, when there is going to be decrease the PaO2 level. PO2 level கம்மியாகுதுன்னா அப்பயும் there is going to be a right shift. And number 5, whenever there is going to be a exercise, when you're going to do a over exercise or whenever you're going to exercise, what happens? There is going to be a reduction in the affinity. And number 6, write down when there is going to be decrease in the pH level. Number 7, you are going to write when there is an increase in the 2,3 bisphosphoglycerate. I think this you can just you will be seeing this in the glycolysis. Okay, glycolysis in your biochemistry you will be reading it. Okay, so you will be reading it in the biochemistry. And very importantly, what happens? Decrease in the pH, you call this as a Bohr's effect. This calls as a Bohr's effect. So whenever decrease in the pH, Okay, so நம்ம chloride shift பார்த்தோம்ல, அந்த chloride shift ஓட concept தான் நீங்க யூஸ் பண்ண போறீங்க. Okay, you're going to use the chloride shift concept. So whenever there is going to be acidic pH, what happens? Oxygen gets dissociated, oxygen is released into plasma. That is why you call this as a Bohr's effect. Whenever there is going to be a increase in the PCO2 level, that is going to cause the oxygen dissociation. That is called as Aldane's effect. So Bohr's effect, Aldane's effect is covered here. And last and finally, remember guys, last and finally, okay, you have to remember that in the high altitude, you will be having a shift to right. Whenever there is you're going to go for high altitude, there is going to be a shift to right. There is going to be a shift to right. That also you have to remember. Now we are going to move towards left shift. Left shift na increase in the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. That is called as your left shift. Okay, engala left shift unga idukku opposite அப்படியே PCO2 level கம்மி ஆகணும். pH வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா has to be increasing. Temperature should go down whenever there is going to be a rise in the PO2 level, and whenever there is going to be a rise in the pH, whenever there is going to be more amount of carboxy hemoglobin increase ஆகுமா என்ன ஆகும்? ஹீமோகுளோபின்ல carbon dioxide is going to take the carboxy hemoglobin வந்து it is going to be causing oxygen increase in the oxygen affinity number, and whenever there is going to be a carbon monoxide poisoning. So carbon monoxide poisoning illa enna agum, there will be more affinity for oxygen. Okay va? So carbon monoxide poisoning. And seventh one vandu pathina, whenever there is going to be more fetal hemoglobin, HbF has increased oxygen. Okay, it has increased oxygen. Okay va? Oxygen affinity vandu nariya irukum. Okay va? So what is PaO2 level? Normal PaO2 is going to be 27 millimeter of mercury. 27 millimeter of mercury. Hemoglobin is 50% saturated. In all these things, hemoglobin is going to be 50% saturated. So அதுதான் வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா PaO2 அப்படி நம்ம சொல்றோம். Next important thing you have to know is, you have to know what is hypoxia and what is hypoxemia. Okay, you have to know what is hypoxia and what is hypoxemia. Okay va? So let's see what is hypoxia and what is hypoxemia. Okay va? So let me tell you this concept very clearly. So total atmospheric pressure. So total atmospheric pressure in our surrounding is going to be 760 millimeter of mercury. Okay, millimeter of mercury in the atmosphere, and in the atmosphere and then PaO2 in your atmosphere, it is going to be 149. Almost it is going to be 102. Okay va? So it's going to be 149 in your atmosphere, and unga body alveoli 149 வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா in the atmosphere, and alveoli ல எவ்வளவு PaO2 இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா 102. இந்த values, இந்த மூணு valuesமே important, you should remember. Okay va? So now tell me, what is hypoxia? What is hypoxia? I'll tell you what is hypoxia. Hypoxia means very low oxygen availability. Very low oxygen availability. Okay va? In a tissue for its own metabolic process. For its own metabolic process. Okay, for its own metabolic process, that is called as your hypoxia. And what is hypoxemia? Hypoxemia na decrease in the oxygen level in blood. So decrease in the oxygen level in blood is called as hypoxemia. Hypoxia means very low oxygen availability in a tissue for its own metabolic process. That is called as your hypoxia. Hypoxemia na decreased level of oxygen levels in the blood. That is called as hypoxemia. So both are not same. Both are not same. That is what I want you all to remember. Both are not same. Hypoxia and hypoxemia is not same. Now let's see about the hypoxia and hypoxemia in detail. Okay, let's see hypoxia and hypoxemia in detail, guys. So now first one, hypoxia. I told you already what is hypoxia. Hypoxia na very low oxygen availability for tissues. So hypoxia na very low availability of oxygen in tissue for its metabolic purpose. Okay, for its metabolic purpose. This is called as hypoxia. Now hypoxia is a short note question for you all. Hypoxia is asked as a short note question for you all. Okay, Okay, so hypoxia is going to be a short note question for you all, which you have to remember. So you are going to remember that very easily. Now we will be making it as a tabular column. Okay, let's make that as a tabular column so that it is going to be easy. You are going to remember it very well. So you are going to remember it very well. Okay, okay, let's start. So hypoxia. So there are 4 different types of hypoxia. Okay, what are the 4 different types of hypoxia? Hypoxic hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, you have histotoxic hypoxia, and you're going to have a stagnant hypoxia. Okay, so hypoxic hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, histotoxic hypoxia, and stagnant hypoxia. So what happens? Okay, நம்ம இத வந்து எப்படி நம்ம டிவைட் பண்றோம்னா based on 3 important characters: oxyhemoglobin and dissolved form of hemoglobin. Okay, dissolved form of hemoglobin, that is going to be based on the oxygen tension, and you're going to have based on the oxygen content. Okay, so hypoxic hypoxia enna agum, oxygen availability illa, availability of oxygen in the tissue is reduced, that is your hypoxic hypoxia. So because of that, what happens? You're going to have reduced oxygen content. Anemic hypoxia is going to be because of the RBC is unable to carry the oxygen because your iron or first you have iron deficiency anemia. Iron deficiency anemia, iron is not there. Iron is going to play a major role for affinity of your oxygen. So affinity of oxygen is reduced if iron is not present in an adequate number. So ingiyum and the oxygen content will be reduced. But histotoxic hypoxia enna agudhu? Histotoxic hypoxia there is going to be a tissues which is unable to take oxygen content. So there's a problem in the tissues. Okay, another tissue cannot take oxygen. For example, cyanide poisoning, tissue is unable to take oxygen. So inge oxygen content will be normal. So inge oxygen content will be normal, that you have to remember. And finally, stagnant hypoxia. Stagnant hypoxia enna agum, angiyum vandu pathina there is some blockage of the vessel, angiyum oxygen content will be normal. Okay, so now coming to the hypoxic, dissolved form again inge reduced agum, but anemic RBC is the one that is going to have that is going to be depending upon near anemia. But in a dissolved form எப்படி இருக்கும்? நார்மலா தான் இருக்கும் இங்க dissolved form. Similarly, histotoxic dissolved form நார்மலா இருக்கும், stagnantly dissolved form நார்மலா இருக்கும். Oxyhemoglobin. So oxyhemoglobin கண்டிப்பா அனீமியால வந்து hemoglobin level கம்மியா இருக்கு, ஆனா oxyhemoglobin level கம்மியா இருக்கும். Hypoxically there will be reduced, but again histotoxic and stagnant hypoxia will be normal. This is the difference between the hypoxic hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, histotoxic hypoxia, and stagnant hypoxia. So this you need to remember. And finally, we are going to move towards this terminology, hypoxemia. What is hypoxemia? I told decreased oxygen level in blood. I'm very particularly telling decreased oxygen level in the blood. Apart, this is what I told you. PaO2 level வந்து 102 millimeter of mercury. But PaO2, that is going to be arterial blood, it is going to be 98 millimeter of mercury. So what is the pressure gradient difference? 4 millimeter of mercury is going to be pressure difference. Okay, partial pressure of alveoli is going to be 102. Partial pressure of oxygen in the normal blood is going to be almost 98. So you have 4 millimeter of mercury difference. So normal alveolar arterial gradient இருந்ததுன்னா ஒண்ணுமே ப்ராப்ளம் இல்ல. Whenever there is going to be a normal alveolar arterial gradient இருந்தா ஒரு சில கண்டிஷன்ஸ் வரும். சில கண்டிஷன்ல என்ன ஆகும்னா there can be increased alveolar arterial gradient. So in the condition there will be increased alveolar atrial condition. So I will tell you normal alveolar atrial condition gradient. இங்க வந்து alveoli gradient arterial gradient வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா almost equal இருக்கு. எந்த கண்டிஷன்ல ஈக்குவலா இருக்கும்? For example, in your high altitude, what happens is atmospheric oxygen level is reduced. Adinala there is equal reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen of your artery, and that is there is going to be equal reduction in the partial pressure of alveolar oxygen. So there is going to be decrease in the atmospheric oxygen level. Second வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா hypoventilation, when there is going to be a reduced oxygen availability in the atmosphere. Again, that is also a hypoxic hypoxia. For example, ventilation, hypoxic hypoxia. Okay, example வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா hypoxic hypoxia. In your hypoxic hypoxia also what happens? There is going to be reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen in your alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen in the artery. But there are some conditions where there is going to be increase in the alveolar arterial gradient. For example, when there is going to be a normal PaO2 level and there's a reduction in the partial pressure oxygen in the arteries. Okay, so artery la irukக்கூடிய oxygen level கம்மியா இருக்கு. So அப்ப என்ன ஆகும்? PaO2 நார்மலா இருக்கு, but arterial oxygen கம்மியா இருக்கு. அப்ப ரெண்டுத்தையும் தானே நம்ம மைனஸ் பண்றோம். So we are going to minus these two, right? அப்ப when you are going to minus, what happens? This level will be increased. So alveolar arterial gradient will be increased. எங்கெல்லாம் alveolar arterial gradient will be increased? Number one, in case of a shunt. In case of shunt, so right to left shunt இருக்கும்ல conditions, அங்கெல்லாம் increase ஆகும். Second thing, when ventilation perfusion mismatch. Ventilation perfusion mismatch. Example வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா right ventricular failure, or when there is going to be a pulmonary artery stenosis, pulmonary artery stenosis. In all these conditions, again there is going to be a increase in the alveolar arterial gradient. And number three, diffusion defect. Okay, diffusion defect. For example, your lung fibrosis. Lung fibrosis, in this conditions also what happens? There is going to be a hypoxemia. There is going to be hypoxemia. Next, we are going to move towards the next important concepts. That is going to be this. If you are going to remember, we can move towards the next important thing. That is going to be your pulmonary circulation. So let's move towards the pulmonary circulation. Okay, so when you're going to talk about the pulmonary circulation, okay, so it is this pulmonary circulation. For increase in the oxygen, we should make more blood reaches your lungs. Okay, so இப்போ இந்த மாதிரி கண்டிஷன்ஸ்ல நமக்கு ரெண்டு ஆப்ஷன் இருக்கு. So ஒன்னு வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா we can increase the oxygen concentration in the blood so that more amount of oxygen reaches your lungs. இல்லனா நம்ம என்ன பண்ணலாம்னா oxygen level கம்மியா இருக்கு, but we can increase the blood that is going to reach, increase the blood that is going to reach your lungs. Okay va? So either way நமக்கு total amount of oxygen reaching your lungs has to be increased. அப்ப pulmonary circulation should have low resistance. Remember, it should have low resistance and it should have high compliance. It should have high compliance so that more amount of oxygen is going to reach. Okay va? So remember, alveolar hypoxia. So எப்ப alveolar hypoxia வரும்னா, so decrease resistance, increase compliance, இது ரெண்டும் இருந்தா normal alveolar oxygen concentration can be maintained. Okay, அப்ப நமக்கு என்ன நமக்கு இதுல இருந்து தெரியுதுன்னா, எந்த கண்டிஷன்ல you will get alveolar hypoxia. Alveolar hypoxia will be getting in only one condition, when there is going to be a pulmonary vasoconstriction. So pulmonary vasoconstriction ஏற்பட்டா, that is going to be decreased amount of blood reaching your alveoli. Only in those conditions you will have a decrease in the pulmonary circulation. Decrease ஆகும்போது alveolar hypoxia will be caused. Only then you will have alveolar hypoxia. Only then you will be having alveolar hypoxia. Okay, that is what you need to understand. Okay, so now what you are going to see is, we are going to see the blood level. Okay, blood levels of gases when there is going to be a diffusion limitation. When there is a diffusion limitation and when there is going to be a perfusion limitation. So diffusion limitation, perfusion limitation என்ன ஆகுதுன்னு பார்க்கிறோம். இப்ப diffusion limited இருக்கு. அப்ப diffusion limited இருந்தா there will be more affinity for the hemoglobin, but perfusion limitation இருந்ததுன்னா there will be a decreased affinity for hemoglobin. And remember, more gas can be given in diffusion limitation. More gas can be given. Okay, gradient is maintained. Gradient is going to be maintained. Okay, and never or very slowly equalizes the pressure gradient. It is going to be never or very slow equalization of pressure gradient. Okay va? Pressure gradient. Adhe inge enna aguna, there is going to be a decrease in the affinity for hemoglobin. Faster pressure gradient will be there. There will be faster pressure gradient will be there. Equalization will be occurring. Equalization will be there for oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen. Ida vandu base pandrathu da unga fixed law. I think fixed law is a 2-mark question when I was studying, but now 2-mark question illanala they can ask us a 1-mark question. So what does your fixed law states? Diffusion is directly proportional to the thickness. Okay, wow. Diffusion is directly proportional to the thickness. This is your fixed law. That is what your fixed law tells. Okay, now we are finally moving towards the chemical controls. That is going to be your respiratory regulation. Chemical controls. Okay, chemical controls. Let's see the chemical controls now. So chemical controls நீ என்ன நான் வச்சுக்கணும்னா first. So chemical control main யார் பண்றாங்கன்னா oxygen sensitive potassium channels. So there are some oxygen sensitive potassium channels which are going to act as a chemoreceptors, So you're going to have a chemoreceptors here. Okay, this chemoreceptors are going to be ATP sensitive potassium channel. Okay, you're going to have certain peripheral receptors. You're going to have some peripheral chemoreceptors and you're going to have a central chemoreceptors. These two things you need to understand. Peripheral chemoreceptors, number one, they are going to be located in carotid bodies. They are going to be located in the carotid bodies. That is going to be your 9th cranial nerve, carotid bodies. And you're going to have a aortic arch locate aayirkum. That is going to be a 10th nerve. So what are the factors that are going to be involved here? Whenever there is going to be a decrease in the PaO2 level, okay, increase in the PaCO2 level, decrease in the pH. Okay, இது எல்லாத்தையும் இவங்க என்ன பண்றாங்கன்னா they are going to be recognizing changes in the blood, changes in circulating blood. So whenever your blood is going to be passing through your carotid artery, okay, aortic arch, angala certain chemoreceptors are there. For example, your carotid bodies, for example, your aortic arch bodies, even 9th nerve, 10th nerve mulama, they are going to recognize. Okay, that is a peripheral body. So what happens in the central chemoreceptors? Central chemoreceptors, they are located in medulla. They are going to be located in the medulla oblongata. So what happens? Your carbon dioxide spills out of the vessel, and what happens is they are going to be dissolving with water in your CSF, and in the presence of carbonic anhydrase they are going to form H2CO3. This H2CO3 again they are going to form H plus HCO3 minus. In the H plus enna pannuna, it is going to trigger the central chemoreceptors. They are going to be triggering your central chemoreceptors. Okay, that is what you need to understand. That is your H plus and HCO3. They are going to be triggering your central chemoreceptors. Okay, now let me easily give you the neural pathway. Okay, neural pathway for the breathing. This I want you all to remember. What is going to be the neural pathway of breathing? This is called as your Ehring-Brewer reflex. I saw this one question in a short note in some of the model papers. What is Ehring-Brewer reflex? See here, I'll draw along with me. You also draw the same pathway that you can represent in your exam directly. See here, you're going to have a motor and sensory cortex. You're going to have a motor sensory cortex. You're going to have a limbic cortex. You're going to have a thalamus and hypothalamus. Okay, wow. So you're going to have two group of fibers. Okay, you're going to have a two group of fibers. You're going to have two group of nucleus. Okay, you're going to have two group of nucleus. You're going to call that as a dorsal group of nucleus, and you're going to have a ventral group of nucleus. Okay, dorsal group of nucleus will be involved in inspiration. Okay, you're going to have a ventral group of nucleus. These are respiratory centers. They are going to be involved in both inspiration summa konja part mattum, followed by expiration. So idukku per da we call it as a pre-Botzinger's complex. Pre-Botzinger காம்ப்ளெக்ஸ். ஓகேவா, ப்ரீ-பாட்ஸிங்கர் காம்ப்ளெக்ஸ். இந்த ப்ரீ-பாட்ஸிங்கர் காம்ப்ளெக்ஸை சில cervical nerves activate பண்ணும். ஓகேவா, so that is going to be your C3, C4, C5 connected இருக்கு. இது வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா it is going to be connected to the diaphragm. ஓகேவா, this you remember now. See what happens, you are going to have a 10th cranial now. ஓகேவா, so you are going to have two centers here. Number one, you call it as a pneumotaxic center, and number two, you call it as a apneustic center. Pneumotaxic center, apneustic center. Okay, ரெண்டு centers இருக்கு. ஓகேவா, so these two centers are going to be your 10th cranial nerve. Okay, whenever there is going to be a sensation of decrease in oxygen, whenever there is going to be a sensation of decrease in the oxygen, you are going to have certain mechanoreceptors that are going to be there through your 10th nerve. That is going to supply to pneumotoxic center. That is going to be supplied to the apneustic center. Apneustic center வந்து the 10th nerve inhibit பண்ணும், pneumotoxic center வந்து stimulate பண்ணும். So pneumotoxic center வந்து it has a connection with apneustic center for inhibiting. ஓகேவா, so whenever 10th cranial nerve is going to give 10th cranial nerve நம்ம பார்த்தோம்ல aortic arch, that is going to be a chemical chemoreceptors, and there are some mechanical receptors also which is going to be coming from your diaphragm. Okay, all these receptors are going to stimulate your pneumotoxic center and they are going to inhibit your apneustic center. Okay va, so ரெண்டு விஷயம் நம்ம பார்த்துட்டோம். apneustic center inhibit பண்ணது, pneumotoxic center activate பண்ணது. இந்த pneumotoxic center in addition it is going to also inhibit your apneustic center. இது வரைக்கும் clear-ஆ? Then நமக்கு சென்ஸ் இந்த மெக்கானிக்கல் ரிசெப்டர்ஸ் வந்து 10th nerve வழியா apneustic center and pneumotoxic centerக்கு போகுது. Similarly what happens, chemical chemoreceptors இருக்குல்ல, chemical chemoreceptors, இந்த chemical chemoreceptors வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா they go and stimulate, they go and tell the information to your cortex. அப்ப cortex என்ன பண்ணும், it is going to send information to the pons. ஓகேவா, பான்ஸுக்கு இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் பாஸ் பண்ணும். ஸோ whenever there is going to be more respiration, more oxygen availability, பான்ஸ் சரி ஓகே நீ அமைதியாருன்னு இனிபிட் பண்ணும். இப்போ எப்போ வந்து உங்களுக்கு கம்மியான ஆக்சிஜன் லெவல் இருக்கோ அப்போ ஸ்டிமுலேட் பண்ணும். அப்போ இட் ஹாஸ் போத் ஸ்டிமுலேட்டரி ஆக்ஷன் as well as இனிபிட்டரி ஆக்ஷன். இந்த பான்ஸ் as a connection with the pneumotoxic center and your apneustic center. Okay, pneumotoxic center and apneustic center. So இப்போ என்ன பண்ணுது, இங்கேருந்து again it is going to go for the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata la you know that they are going to be having this two nucleus, dorsal group of nucleus, ventral group of nucleus. அப்ப இந்த apneustic center and pneumotoxic center கே போகாம உங்க chemical receptors cortex-க்கு போறப்ப cortex வந்து did not go and stimulate your pneumotoxic center. Instead it can go directly, it can stimulate your medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata stimulate பண்ணா என்ன ஆகும், it is going to stimulate the inspiration and expiration through dorsal group and ventral group of nucleus. Directly it can stimulate, or else it can go to the pneumotoxic center. Pneumotoxic center unga apneustic center they are going to have a connection with, okay, they are going to have a connection with dorsal group of nucleus and ventral group of nucleus. Either it can stimulate or it can inhibit. Whenever there is going to be hypoxia, what happens is it is going to stimulate the dorsal and ventral group of nucleus, which is going to cause increase in the respiration and increase in the breathing. இந்த மாதிரி தான் ஒரு கண்ட்ரோல் வச்சிருக்கு, பிரீத்திங்க்கு கண்ட்ரோல். ஸோ அப்போ பிரீத்திங்க்கு கண்ட்ரோல் வச்சிருக்கிறது யாரு, உங்களோட. இது எல்லாரையும் யார் வந்து கோஆர்டினேட் பண்றாங்க அப்படின்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா ப்ரீ-பாட்ஸிங்கர் காம்ப்ளெக்ஸ். தட் இஸ் வை ப்ரீ-பாட்ஸிங்கர் காம்ப்ளெக்ஸ் is going to have a control, is going to have a control over this. It is going to have a control over your medulla oblongata. Okay, pre-Bodzinger complex. Pre-Bodzinger complex is going to have a control over your medulla oblongata. Okay, wow. So that is why we call this as the pacemaker. We call this as a pacemaker of respiration. We call it as a pacemaker of respiration. Very, very important. Dorsal group of nucleus are involved in inspiration. Ventral group of nucleus are involved in the expiration. Okay, அப்ப மெயினா உங்க apneustic centers ஓட வேலை என்ன? Okay, your apneustic center நம்ம சொல்றோம்ல அதோட வேலை என்ன அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, okay, this is going to increase the inspiratory activity. Apneustic centerக்குன்னு ஒரு ஸ்பெசிஃபிக்கான வேலை இருக்கு. What does your apneustic activity do? It is going to increase the Okay, increase the inspiratory activity by stimulating your dorsal group of nucleus. It is going to increase the dorsal group of nucleus as well. Okay, dorsal group of nucleus, and this will be inhibited by, okay, pneumotoxic, okay, pneumotoxic centers on the inhibit pannu. And what are the different lung mechanoreceptors present? Lung mechanoreceptors, okay, you're going to have number one, you're going to have a hearing by Bayer reflex. Inflation reflex, deflation reflex. Inflation reflex, and you have a deflation reflex. Deflation reflex, you have two type of reflexes. Okay, that's all. With this, we are coming to the end of a very important topic that is going to be your, okay, that is going to be your neural pathway. Neural pathway, frequent question. So I want you to remember that. And next we are going to move towards the two important things. Okay, let me tell you two important things followed as included CPR basics. Okay, CPR basics include pannirukanga. So I'll tell you the basics of CPR. Rate of compressing, it's going to be around 100 to 130, okay, per minute compressions. Okay, and the depth should be almost 5 to 6 centimeter. So depth 5 to 6 centimeters. Okay, so what you are going to do is you are going to breathe, mouth to mouth breathing, and it will be done in the ratio of 30:2. Okay, 30:2 breathing. And you have another one. So either you can put the patient in the supine position, or you can go in the prone position. Supine position la neenga enna pandreenga nose pinch pannanum. Okay va, positive pressure ventilation kudukalam. Okay va, and then prone position la neenga vandu compression kuduthenga, that is called as Schaeffer's method. Okay va, just idella or additional points in case they can, if they ask you, you should be able to write it. Okay va, so in case if they ask you, you should be able to write it. So adinala I am just giving these additional points. Okay, so examination la iduvaring ketadilla. Next important thing is oxygen administration. எந்த கண்டிஷன்லாம் ஆக்சிஜன் அட்மினிஸ்ட்ரேட் பண்ணுவீங்க? ஓகேவா, so oxygen administration எப்பலாம் பண்ணுவோம்னா when there is going to be a decompression sickness. Okay, when the patient is going to have decompression sickness, when there is going to be a carbon monoxide poisoning, okay, and when there is going to be a carbon monoxide poisoning, nitrogen narcosis, when there is going to be a chronic non-healing ulcers. In all these conditions, you will be administrating oxygen. Okay, va? So hypoxia. Enna condition la? Number one, when there is going to be hypoxia, hypovolemia. So there is going to be oxygen availability will be decreased in this condition. When there is going to be a diffusion defect, so like COPD, membrane disorders, appa more amount of oxygen amchu paakrenga. And when there is going to be a intubation, when you're going to do a difficult intubation. So when you're going to do a difficult intubation, what happens? You will be doing a pre-oxygenation. And number 4, oxygen transport induced atelectasis. Okay, wow. So in the conditions, what you can do? Okay, so if 1 minute. Oxygen induced transport atelectasis can occur because of the complication. It can occur as a complication of oxygen administration. So you have certain complications of oxygen administration. One is atelectasis. Oxygen nariya kudukumbodhu lung collapse ஆகிறதுக்கான chance இருக்கு. Number 2, oxygen directly நம்ம கொடுக்கறப்ப it can cause pulmonary injury and inflammation cause பண்ணலாம். And number 3, it can cause oxygen derived free radical injury. And number 4 is going to be loss of ventilative derived respiratory loss. So ventilation derived பண்ணும்போது what it can cause is it can loss, there is going to be decrease in the carbon dioxide wash out achna, that is going to lead to decrease in the respiratory drive. Okay, that are the complications of oxygen administration. And finally we are going to have the last but not least. What is this? life at a high altitude sickness. So rendu question இன்னும் பாக்கி இருக்கு. High altitude sickness, decompression sickness. Okay, let's see both the questions. We are going to see the life at high altitude. Okay, this is a frequent question that is asked in the exam. What happens in a high altitude? There is going to be two important conditions that are going to occur. One, PaO2 level will be reduced. When there is a PaO2 level reduced in the atmosphere, that means there is a reduction in the atmospheric pressure. Overall, atmospheric pressure level கம்மியா இருக்கு. Oxygen availability கம்மியா இருக்கும். Okay, oxygen availability level கம்மியா இருக்கு பாடியில. அப்ப this leads to hypoxia. ஏன்னா there is going to be decrease in the PaO2 level. In turn, there is going to be decrease in the alveolar pressure. That is going to lead to hypoxia. So, ரெண்டு different mechanism. ஒரு பக்கம் நமக்கு PaO2 level கம்மியா இருக்கு. இன்னொரு பக்கம் alveolar pressure level கம்மியா இருக்கு. Whenever there is going to be decrease in the alveolar pressure, that will cause pulmonary vasoconstriction. Okay, constriction. This will lead to pulmonary hypertension. இது ஒரு பக்கம் pulmonary hypertension cause பண்ணுது. Pulmonary hypertension வர்றப்ப what happens is there is going to be a extravasation of blood. This will be causing, extravasation of blood will be causing pulmonary edema. This is called as high altitude pulmonary edema. ஒரு பக்கம். இன்னொரு பக்கம் PaO2 level கம்மியா இருக்கு. PaO2 level கம்மியா இருக்கு அப்படின்னா what happens is there is going to be a oxygen supply to your brain will be reduced. That will lead to cerebral, அப்ப என்ன பண்ணும்? Cerebral vasodilatation cause பண்ணும். ஏன்னா ஆக்சிஜன் அவைலபிலிட்டியே கம்மியா இருக்கு. அப்ப இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் டைலேட் பண்ணா நிறைய பிளட் வரும். நிறைய பிளட் வந்து ஆக்சிஜன் நிறைய ஆகும். That's what we saw in the last slide. So that is why there is a pulmonary, there is going to be cerebral vasodilatation. Cerebral vasodilatation will cause leakage of blood into your cerebral spaces, and that will be leading to cerebral edema. இது எல்லாமே long term complication, not short term. It's a long term complications. Okay, so what happens whenever there is going to be a hypoxia? Whenever there is going to be hypoxia, there is going to be decrease in the PaO2 level. There is going to be decrease in the alveolar concentration as well as your atmospheric concentration. This is going to lead to two important things. One, it will be lead to hypoxia as well as there is going to lead to hypoxemia. Hypoxemia வந்து என்ன, I have told you, it will be triggering your chemoreceptors. It is going to be triggering your chemoreceptors. It is going to cause increase in the breathing. That is increase in the ventilation. So ventilation increases now, that is going to cause increase in the respiratory rate. This you have to remember. And other side, hypoxemia is going to cause renal erythropoietin synthesis. Renal erythropoietin synthesis. When there is going to be renal erythropoietin synthesis, what happens? It is going to cause increase in the RBC synthesis. Okay, whenever there is going to be increase in the RBC synthesis, what happens? இன்னொரு பக்கம் there is going to be a more availability of 2,3 bisphosphoglycerate in your RBC. 2,3 bisphosphoglycerate in your RBC. And what happens? Whenever there is going to be increase in the ventilation, increase in the respiratory rate, that is going to cause more carbon dioxide washout. So more amount of carbon dioxide is going to get out now. That will cause respiratory alkalosis. That will cause respiratory alkalosis. Alkalosis na enna? Respiratory alkalosis. That is going to cause increase in the pH. Okay, so now tell me, you have two factors for shifting of your, okay, so this is going to be the increase in the pH and so on. Increase in the pH is going to favor what? It is going to favor increased affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. That is going to be left shift. There is one factor that is going to cause left shift, but you have increase in the 2,3 bisphosphoglycerate, which is going to cause right shift. That is going to cause right shift. Right shift. It is going to cause right shift. And there is going to be decrease in the PaO2 level. Okay, oxygen saturation level கம்மி ஆகுது. That will also shift your curve towards right. So right shift. அப்ப மொத்தம் 2 right shift, 2 point favors your right shift and 1 point favors your left shift. So basically என்ன ஆகும்னா at the end there is going to be a right shift. So ஒரே வார்த்தையில சொல்லணும்னா இந்த இதை நீங்க ஃபுல்லா படிச்சீங்க பாத்தீங்களா, mountain sickness or high altitude acclimatization, இதுல என்ன ஆகுதுன்னா there is going to be a right shift of hemoglobin dissociation curve. So அதுதான் வந்து at the end what you wanted to tell us, there is going to be a right shift of your hemoglobin curve. There is going to be a right shift of hemoglobin curve. That is what you are actually telling. That is what you want actually. Okay, next you are going to see about this deep sea diving. எத்தனை பேர் deep sea diving போயிருக்கீங்க? எத்தனை பேர் வந்து have you gone to Andaman or Lakshadweep or outside the country? So snorkeling. So இதெல்லாம் if you have done, you will be knowing what happens basically. So in snorkeling also, okay, in the snorkeling also what happens, there is going to be increase in the atmospheric pressure. So unlike your high altitude, inga atmospheric pressure will be increased. Have you seen the latest news? There was one submarine ship which has gone in search of the Titanic parts, and what happened is because of high increase in the atmospheric pressure, the submarine blasted. Have you seen that news? So that's a thing how you can remember. There is going to be increase in the atmospheric pressure and there is going to be increase in the compression. Okay, so compression of ரெண்டு பக்கம், ஒன்னு lung compression ரைஸ் ஆகும், இன்னொன்னு gases நிறைய ஃபார்ம் ஆகும். So in the gases law, whenever it is going to be in the increased atmospheric pressure or increased in the compression, this is going to lead to changing to liquid. Okay, it can change to liquid. So what happens when you are going to breathe the compressed gas? So when you're going to breathe this compressed gas, for example air, if you're going to breathe, what happens is, so அப்ப நீங்க என்ன பண்ணணும்னா, so compressed gases அப்ப breathe பண்ற மாதிரி இருக்கும். So you will be breathing your compressed gases. So in the, okay, have you seen this in the picture? I think it is there. So in the they will be carrying oxygen cylinder, right? So how it will be? It will be as a liquid oxygen. It will be in the liquidized form. Liquid oxygen தான் இருக்கும். But basically there is a concept that in these conditions, if you wanted to carry, please you have to carry not oxygen in the liquid form, not just your compressed air in the atmospheric area carry பண்ணாம, you have something called as trimix. You have something called trimix. What is this trimix? It is going to consist of only 20% oxygen. It is going to consist of 30% helium. And you will be having 50% nitrogen. This is the composition of the trimix cylinder which they are carrying. So idha avanga breathe பண்ணுவாங்க. Compressed gas la for survival. For survival in the compressed gas, in the lower or in your sea, you need to inhale compressed gas. You need to inhale compressed gas. Okay, so if the next concept what you are going to see is, okay, so what happens if you are going to be going in the deep sea? No problem, deep sea liye irundha problem illa. But whenever you are going to have a sudden ascent to the surface, when you are going to have a sudden ascent to the surface, okay, sudden ascent to the sudden ascent to the surface, what happens is, okay, your liquid gas. So usually I told you, right, in a low in the high atmospheric pressure, it will be in a liquid gas. This liquid gas is going to get bubbled. Okay, it's going to get bubbled and inside your lungs, and it can occlude the blood vessels, and this can lead to air embolism. That is the important. Okay, so because of this, what happens basically in the bubbles வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா, they will be occurring in the joints, and that will be followed by your lungs. So what is going to be a treatment? Treatment is very simple. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That is going to be the treatment of choice. That is going to be a treatment of choice. Okay, that is going to be a treatment of choice. So this comes to the end of very important topic. That is going to be your that is going to be a deep sea diving. So that is going to be a deep sea diving. Next, we are going to discuss about next important thing, asphyxia and drowning. Okay, next important thing what we are going to discuss is asphyxia and drowning. See, asphyxia na enna? Very simple. Asphyxia, drowning, இது எல்லாமே வந்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா what happens is there is a reduction in the oxygen. So there is going to be a systemic manifestation of hypoxia. So whenever there is going to be a strangulation, okay, forensic படிப்பீங்க next year and third year la. So there is going to be a strangulation, hanging. So when you're going to when someone is hanging or when someone is going to hold your neck, what happens? There is going to be oxygen decrease in the oxygen, and there is going to be increase in the carbon dioxide retention. This is called as your asphyxia. This is called as your asphyxia. Asphyxia la enna aguna in case they ask you. So this is your asphyxia. Okay. And next, okay. And next what happens? We are going to see about the drowning. Okay. Next we are going to see about the drowning. So drowning la enna agudhu? So drowning la water is going to reach. So water is going to go to your pharynx. So water வந்து you will be inherently what you will do, you will just நீங்க வந்து வாட்டரை தான் ப்ரீத் பண்ணுவீங்க. அப்ப என்ன ஆகும்னா pharynx larynx குள்ள வாட்டர் ரீச் ஆகுது. So what happens? There is going to be pharynx larynxக்குலாம் எப்பயாவது போறப்ப what happens is ரெண்டு விஷயம் நடக்கலாம். ஒன்னு, if it is going to enter through your larynx to your lungs, there can be a reflex inspiration, and that can lead to aspiration. And other side, there can be a reflex laryngospasm, and laryngospasm ஏற்பட்டா automatically they will be choking to death. Okay, they will be choking to death. This is talking about the drowning. Okay, next, last but not least, we are going to have for some important breathing patterns which you are going to read. Okay, what is euphonia? Normal breathing rate and rhythm. So what is tachypnea? Whenever there is going to be increased respiratory rate. What is brachypnea? Brachypnea na decreased respiratory rate. Apnea na absence of breathing. Now comes the different forms of your periodic breathing. Number one, hyperapnea, increased depth and rate of breathing. What is Kind-Stokes breathing? Kind-Stokes breathing na, there is a gradual increase and decrease of breathing followed by, okay, apnea. So there is going to be a gradual rise and decrease in the breathing, which is going to be followed by apnea. That is going to be in a crescendo decrescendo pattern. அப்படிதான் கொடுத்திருப்பாங்க. அதான் rise and fall. அதான் crescendo decrescendo pattern. So எப்ப இது ஆகும்னா, whenever there is going to be diffuse alveolar damage, okay, at that time you will get Kind-Stokes breathing. Next is going to be a Biot's breathing. What is Biot's breathing? Abnormal breathing pattern with group of clusters of rapid respiration equal in the rest and regular apnea period. You're going to have regular apnea period. Next is going to be Kussmaul's breathing. This is very important. You can get in variety. Acidosis, acidosis la varum, diabetic ketoacidosis la. So this is very important. Tachypnea followed by hyperopnea. Tachypnea followed by hyperapnea. This is Kussmaul's breathing. And where you will get apneustic breathing. Apneustic breathing na prolonged inspiratory with prolonged expiratory. Whenever there is going to be a lower pontine, middle pontine, lower and middle pontine damage, or whenever there is going to be a damage lateral to tectum. Okay, you will be getting this apneustic breathing. And you have a few more breathing pattern also. Number one, central neurogenic hyperventilation. Okay, central neurogenic hyperventilation. So it will be like this. Okay, so there is going to be a central hyperventilation. So it's going to be like this continuously. And whenever there is going to be a lower midbrain and upper pontine damage. Okay, so that is going to be anterior to CSF pathway. You will get this apneustic breathing, okay, central neurogenic breathing, and cluster breathing. What is this? Cluster breathing na, there is going to be like this, and there is going to be a followed by this, and then you're going to have like this, followed by this, like this, followed by this. இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறது எப்போ வரும்னா, whenever there is going to be a pontine damage, or whenever there is going to be a meningitis. Okay, with this we are actually completing the entire discussion of your RS. So respiratory is very, very important in terms of questions that can be asked in your exam. So I wish you all best of luck. So respiratory is over. We have completed GS, general physiology is completed. Now muscle physiology is completed. Now respiratory physiology is completely over. We will complete renal and hematology also in the same way. Or I think Benila yesterday told that we want to make it a bit important topics alone can be taken. So we will make it like important topics alone is discussed in the next topic. Okay, thank you so much.